Rappin with ReefBum is sponsored by Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine.
Hey, what's happening, everybody, and welcome back to another episode of Rappin with ReefBum. I'm your host, Keith Berkelhamer. So, I have the pleasure tonight of welcoming back Dong Zou to the show. What's going on there, Dong?
Very good. How are you? It's great to be back.
It's great to have you back there, Dong, and I know based on what I'm seeing here in the chat, people are really digging having you back on. There's a lot of anticipation. There's a lot of anticipation here. So I just want to give a little background on Dong for those that you don't know Dong. He has a PhD in chemistry and worked for several pharmaceutical companies in various therapeutic areas, including anti-inflammatory, cancer, pain management, and anti-infectious diseases. He developed his first interest in marine invertebrates when he was working as a postdoc at the University of Virginia. He has been in the aquarium hobby since he was in college, and he got into the saltwater hobby in 2004 after setting up his first marine tank for a Nemo, and after he discovered the Boston Reefers Society. Yeah, let's go Boston Reefers Society. About 10 years ago, he co-founded his first company on drug discovery. Soon after that, he was able to combine his passion for coral and his experience in the pharmaceutical industry and co-founded a new company, eCove BioMarine. This company focused on aquaculture, coral for drug discovery, and bone grafting. His current company, AcroGarden Inc, was then founded to hold the intellectual properties and to study coral farming. AcroGarden is now his primary focus. The company produces aquaculture coral, mainly SPS for the hobby. And I did pay a visit to Dong a few weeks ago, and I saw firsthand once again what a talented coral grower Dong is, for sure.
Thank you.
But before we get into this conversation with Dong, I want to thank the sponsors for the live stream, both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine. Really appreciate them supporting the live stream, and also appreciate all you folks out there tuning in and supporting the show. Please spread the word. Hit that like button if you haven't done so already. And while you're at it, subscribe to the channel. Why not, right? That'll be awesome. As per usual, comments and questions via the chat are always welcome. We have a whole bunch of topics there, Dong, tonight, right? We got a lot of topics on the agenda, but we can certainly pivot and take questions from the viewers or follow-up questions, what have you. Adam Moore, Dong, exclamation point, Keith's best guest. Could listen to this guy all day.
Thank you.
Yeah, all right. So, Dong, I thought a good way to start this live stream would be talking about, the timeline for starting an SPS dominant tank, right? In terms of setting it up, the cycling process. What I think there's a lot of perceptions out there in terms of timing and how long it takes for a tank to mature, when to add corals, when to add fish. So I mean, let's kind of start with the dry rock versus the live rock options, and these days it's really kind of dry rock is more of a that's really kind of going to be the way that most folks have to go, because there's not a lot of live rock out there. There are some live rock vendors that are available that you could order online, and I guess you can go to a local fish store and pick up some live rock if they're cooking some rock in their facilities. But so let's just assume that dry rock is the only option. How do you approach conditioning or cycling dry rock? What's your process?
I think that in the long run, dry rock and live rock probably won't make too much a difference when a tank is mature. But the initial setup could be quite different. So I remember back maybe like 15 years ago, back then the dry rock is quite different from the dry rock we have today. Back then, and then the manufacturer of dry rock, basically they build the dry rock out of cement. They use the Portland cement, something like that, mixed with a lot of aragonite, like seashell, and then build these interesting structures. And then they put them into seawater and to cure them for like 6 months to a year. But that process apparently is no longer exists today. Well, I'm not talking about the Tampa Bay, because that's a different process. They put it in the ocean, and then the rock come out of the ocean is already live rock. So I'm talking about the dry rock you can buy from store shelf. So the dry rock these days is basically pretty raw. That's the word that I think is the best to describe it. It's pretty raw. Pretty raw means that is all the chemicals. Actually, in the cement, there are a lot of harmful chemical in there. Those chemicals are not being cured or bleached out or actually being settled. So when you purchase dry rock, well, actually, there's an exception, macro rock. So macro rock actually is a land-based ancient reef rock. So those rocks are not built by like the cement and dirt, those kind of things. Those rocks are actually natural. So if you use macro rock, so basically that save you a lot of headache. So, but still, when you get a dry rock, the first thing to do is put them in a big Rubbermaid tub and just garden hose it down. That's the first thing to do. You have to garden hose it down. You never know what this rock is exposed to.
So to spray it with a garden hose or soak it actually in tap water?
Oh, actually spray it first, because that you can see spider, ant, that bees all coming flying off this rock, seriously. So, and also the lots of dust. The dust is you want to spray it off the rock. Don't worry about RODI, nothing. Just a garden hose. Spray them clean, and then you put this rock in a Rubbermaid tub and soak it into tap water. In tap water for like at least 2 or 3 weeks to a month. What happened is that there are some like sodium hydroxide, potassium hydroxide that is part of the component of the cement. They will gradually leach out into the water. So this process actually is very important, because that I have seen many occasions when people just start out their dry rock, they bought the dry rock, they put them in the reef tank and start cycling. And then they will have this interesting phenomena, is that their pH is very high, but the alkalinity is very low. So yeah, when they put in the salt water, so there is a relationship between the pH and alkalinity, despite they're not linear, but there is a relationship there. So you won't see that your alkalinity of your water is probably about 8 to 9 in this water to kill the rock, but your pH is shot through the roof, like 11, 12, something like that. That is part of the hydroxide in those dry rocks slowly leaching out. So it's very important to hose them down and then soak them into just tap water in a big tub.
What about, I see Economical Reefers made a comment, started with dry rock, cleaned, bleach, and dried it. Bleach necessary? Muriatic acid necessary?
It depends. So first of all, I don't think it's really necessary, and but only in the occasion those rocks actually being used before. So you, for example, that on Craigslist, you see somebody has a tank breakdown, and then they line up their rock on the driveway, take a photo.
Yeah.
Okay. So, and then when you get those rocks, the rocks are bone dry. And then they were sitting on the driveway with a tons of crap covering it. Now, in this situation, you need to use bleach as well as citric acid. You do not have to use those very harmful acid that end up getting in your eye or that kind of thing. Use citric acid. Very mild, and also is reef safe, sort of. And then use citric acid to just melt out the first layer.
And that's all the dead organic matter?
Yep, all the dead organic matter. And then your garden hose is your best friend. After you treat it with acid, hose it down.
What about a power washer?
Power washer works, but then the thing is that power washer has such a big force on it. So your rock probably flying around in your lawn.
You're knocking bits off.
Yeah, I think the garden hose is perfectly fine. So just hose it off and then soak them in tap water, and then let all the remaining organic material just decay. And so, but
go ahead. Will that help remove a lot of the phosphate that's inside of that rock? I mean, I think that's a big complaint, I think, and that's something that I've experienced firsthand is algae issues with dry rock. Mm-hmm. What I did with dry rock, I had this Carib Sea life rock recently, about a year ago, and maybe it was a year and a half ago, and I did not garden hose it. I bought it from a local fish store that was actually soaking it in some salt water. They had a system set up. I think the place was in New Hampshire. I can't remember the name of the local fish store. And but I took it back to my house and I dried it out. I didn't really think that there was going to be too much bacteria, biodiversity on that rock, because I think they had been soaking it for a couple of weeks in their system. Mm-hmm. So I put it in a 100-gallon Rubbermaid tub, and so not in fresh water. I put it in the Rubbermaid tub, and I just did 10% weekly water changes with established tank water, and I dosed bacteria along the way. Is that another way to go about doing it, or is that kind of jumping the gun a little bit?
I think that is perfectly fine. For example, that when you're carrying this dry rock, put some bacteria in there, it doesn't hurt. It probably help. But on the other hand, that the decaying on those rocks, there will be sufficient amount of bacteria on it to colonize it, because bacteria really grows very rapidly. So because of those bacteria in a bottle is pretty inexpensive.
Right.
It doesn't hurt. Just pour them in. Maybe that get the rock ready maybe several days earlier or a little bit better. So because this is a hobby, as a scientist, I always look at things as we need to be scientifically correct. We need to research all this rationale. But I always keep reminding myself that we are in a hobby. When we are in a hobby, we need to enjoy the process. And also the thing is that if you feel like pouring several bottles of bacteria on the rock, and actually psychologically it helps.
Yep.
And because it helps, it's worth doing it because it's a hobby. So we don't have to drill down to actually maybe that we spend $10 for this bottle and then buy us 2 more days of 2 days less to kill the rock. No, we don't have to go through that. When we feel like it, we pour a bottle of the bacteria in the rock, and I feel much better, that's worth it.
So you're talking about denitrifying bacteria for new rock, right? We're not talking about bottled bacteria for an established reef tank.
Actually, I think that many of these bacteria for established tank, they're just denitrification bacteria. There's nothing special about it. So that's we can get into more detail about that later on.
Yeah.
So I think most of them are just denitrification bacteria. Seriously, unless that the vendor has a special label, just like the can be clean. The can be clean. It says it does not contain azithromycin, succinate, or phosphate. So unless the bottle saying that it does not contain denitrification bacteria, but it's bacterial, yeah, maybe something else.
Don, what are you
in it.
doing with ChemiClean?
Well, actually, this ChemiClean, I actually try to use it to dip a coral to see if it actually helps.
As a dip?
Yeah, as a dip.
Yeah.
And I can tell you that it does absolutely nothing.
Well, ChemiClean is something we might want to talk about later on. Yeah, you got some props there.
Yep. And I actually use it for unintended use. So I get a negative result. So yeah, it's okay. No problem. Yeah, it's worth trying.
So, all right. We've got the rock soaking in tap water for a few weeks. What's your next step after that?
And then that you, after you soak it in tap water, and then you just soak them in salt water. So preferably, well, yeah, if you already have an established tank, I will use the water from water change from your established tank to soak the new rock. And if you don't have an established tank, well, it just make a salt seawater and then just soak it in there.
How long?
For matter of fact,
go ahead.
Actually, one thing is that since that we are in Boston, we ran next to the ocean. If you really feel like it, you can go to the ocean and get some ocean water to soak that rock. Perfectly fine. So, but don't expect any miracle. But it's basically save you a couple $, and you got to enjoy looking at the ocean. So when you go collect the water, so any salt water will do, and then just soak it. And then after you soak it at least about 1 or 2 weeks, it basically is you just like a cleaning process before you put it in the tank to cycle.
What about adding shrimp or another food source while you're soaking in the salt water? Is that something that you do, or is there another thing you do?
No, I don't think it's necessary.
You don't think it's necessary?
So, yep, it's just a cleaning process. It's not a curing process.
Okay.
So the basic idea is that we want to wash the rock as much as possible before you go into a tank for cycling. So that is, and you can use whatever creative method. I've seen people that actually boil the rock. Well, if you have a big enough pot, that works.
I'm
so
sorry, they do what, Dong?
They put the dry rock in those lobster pots.
Oh.
Boil them. Yeah. Well, kill off everything. And so that all this kind of process, well, when you're having fun with that, that's perfectly fine. So you basically just try to clean the rock as much as possible before you put it into a tank to start the cycling process. And now actually I want to talk about one thing I saw in China many years ago. I went back there, look at their aquaculture effort and the coral, not coral farm, but the pet shops. One thing I saw very common is that they actually get those rocks from the ocean, but they're bone dry. They're not live rock, but they just harvest the rock from the ocean. Of course, it's pretty dirty, those rocks. So they have this big vat. They put the rock under the sun with salt water in it. And then they want the rock to cover with algae. They even have a term for that. So I don't know how to translate into English, but they have a term for this process. They put this dry rock harvest from the ocean, and then they put in a big vat with seawater under the sun. Encourage algae growth.
Interesting.
And then when those algae is covering the rock, they go there and they pull the algae off, and then they start the curing process. So their idea is to get rid of as much nutrient as possible out of those rock surface.
Interesting.
And by allow them to grow algae is a good way to clean those surface.
So they're kind of getting the ugly stage out of the way early.
Yes, yes. And I have seen many pristine tank over there. In Asia, a lot of tanks are absolutely pristine. So they scrub the tank so clean. Sometimes I think, are you sure this tank is 1 year old? It's just absolutely beautifully clean, especially Japanese tank. Oh, those are it's just like, wow. So they all go through this process. They treat the rock actually as a very precious commodity. So they treat the rock just like coral. So they want to cure this rock as good as possible. And those rocks go into a reef tank and they keep clean for a long, long time.
How can we replicate that as hobbyists in our tanks? I mean, should we put the rock in and just blast them with the lights for a while and then take them out and scrub the algae off that rock?
Actually, that very good question. Actually, that go down to one of my interesting viewpoint about how to cycling a tank. So I would recommend turn the light on during the cycle. So because the cycling of the tank is basically cycling of the rock. So what you want to do is that you want the bacteria to establish on the rock. You want all the garbage get removed from the rock. And a lot of this algae, even the microalgae, they don't grow without the light. And there is a interesting phenomena I have seen is that some guy cured the rock. They said, oh, I'm going through this cycle. So in the dark, after 2 months, he tests nitrate, ammonia every day. Wonderful. The tank is pristinely clean. Now he turned on the light, voila, all the algae shows up. So that means that what happens if you turn on the light from day one? Just let the whole ecosystem try to establish themselves in the condition they're going to be under for the long term.
Right.
That's the idea about curing the rock, cycling the tank with the light on instead of light off.
So if you have LEDs, no reason to turn down the intensity at the beginning.
No, just a full blast. Actually, it's not really full blast. For example, that you want to run an AB Plus program.
Yep.
You have the beautiful Radion fixture on it. But don't put them on the shelf, hang them up, program them, let them shine on this dry rock. Just as if that is a full-blown reef tank. So all the life form, including lots of photosynthesis life form, will start to establish as the way it's supposed to be for a long run under this condition.
So what if you have there's a lot of aquascaping that's going on these days in terms of the negative space aquascaping. There's minimalistic type of aquascapes where you glue things together and you form very intricate structures that have a lot of swim throughs and arches and all that stuff. You're basically taking glue and mortar and putty and whatnot, and you're sticking all that stuff together in a tank. What's your advice with that sort of situation, right? I mean, should you be can you do that? And then once you kind of hit the tank at first with all the light and you've got all this algae that I'm assuming you're going to need to take the rock out and scrub it to get that algae off, or how do you get that algae off? Do you just throw a whole bunch of herbivores in there?
Actually, there is a trick.
Sea urchins.
Yep, sea urchin. Now that think about it this way, is that you build this beautiful aquascape, and you can use all the reef safe cement, whatever, saying that to glue them together, and now you have the light at its intended intensity and a life cycle, and now all the algae start to show up. So instead of using a toothbrush, go in there, throw in a bunch of urchin. Now this urchin sometimes is very pesky because they carry stuff. They mess up your coral frag. But at this stage,
when you say
no coral.
When you say carry stuff, meaning moving stuff around.
Yeah, the urchin. Normally that we don't want to put many urchin in the established tank,
right? Because
they carry your $1,000 frag, your home reactor, go to the cave, right? But at this stage, when you're cycling the tank, And of course that you want to test the ammonia and nitrate. So just let the algae grow. Let it grow. Let it grow into a forest, whatever thing. And as long as that your ammonia drop to zero, and you do some water change, and your nitrate also reduced. And then you're looking at this forest of algae. No problem. Now is a good time to throw in maybe 20 urchin in there.
What kind of urchins do you like?
Actually, the pincushion urchin.
Pincushion.
Not those kind of fancy stuff. Actually, there's the Murphy's law that the prettier the urchin, the less job it does. So, and what I found is that I actually have this urchin that I get from a diver from Florida, and then they just like whitish pink. There's not much color to it, but those is a beast by mowing down algae. So one time there's a guy actually got 2 urchin in his tank, and his back wall is all covered with algae. The next morning he woke up, got 2 mowing strip of the 2 urchin on the back. So urchin is your best friend at this moment. So don't worry about that. How ugly the algae, how much algae covering this negative aqua space. So
well,
put your urchin in, mow it down.
Well, will the urchins eat every type of algae in the tank, including Bryopsis?
Actually, I don't know. I'm not very sure about that. But basically, the urchin seems like pretty good, because sometimes the Bryopsis is very hard to ID unless you really look underneath the microscope. But on the other hand, so according to what I've seen so far, so during this cycling process, most of the algae just regular hair algae.
Right. Yep.
So you may have 1 or 2 patch of Bryopsis there, and now you just grab your bone cutter and just scrape them off.
Right.
So if the algae the urchin doesn't touch, scrape them off.
Yes, you're an advocate of manual remover for Bryopsis, as am I.
Oh yeah.
I do not like to put in chemicals. I know a lot of folks believe fluconazole is a good way to get rid of. I mean, I guess it does get rid of Bryopsis, and you know, the question is, it's an antifungal type of element. So
Yep.
does it do any harm to the microbiome? You know, then you get into that sort of stuff.
So actually, that brings up an interesting topic about fluconazole. So the fluconazole is marketed as an antifungal medicine. It's a very good example to showing you that most of the drugs, they are not single targeted. That means that they're not just doing one thing, they do multiple things. For example, this antifungal drug can kill your algae. That is a good demonstration that, yeah, besides it go to kill the fungus, it also kill something else.
Collateral damage.
Exactly, which means that actually being from the drug discovery background, I can tell you that majority of the drug, actually most of them are multi-targeted. That's why we talk about therapeutic window. So basically, if you kill the fungus a little bit better than killing the algae, yeah, that this drug go treat it as an antifungal reagent. So basically, most of the chemical medicine, including antibiotic, especially antibiotic, when you put in your tank, it does not just kill 1 or 2 bacteria, kill them all. A lot of them, a lot of side effects. Side effect is associated with every single drugs. That means that you put some chemical in your tank, you do more than one thing. Something is desirable, many things are not desirable. That is the nature of drug.
Is this a good time to talk about chemicline?
Sure.
Or am I getting ahead of our little agenda here?
No. Yeah, on a live stream, we can talk about anything we want.
Yeah.
Just let it flow.
Yeah.
So chemicline is an interesting thing. It's an antibiotic. Despite that, it try to tell you it's not an antibiotic. Whatever labeling over there is pretty misleading. But it's an antibiotic that it works pretty well on cyano. So that has been used as a red slime remover. So, well, how useful is it? It's pretty effective against cyanobacteria. But now we come back to the question: is that cyanobacteria is always in the water column?
Always.
Yeah, always. so you cannot eradicate them all. And that back to another important thing why we shouldn't bombard. Yeah, go ahead.
So all right, if you're using ChemiClean to get rid of the cyanobacteria, but if it's always in the water column and it can come back if you're not solving the root source of the issue, how effective is the are you really carpet bombing your tank with ChemiClean to get rid of the cyanobacteria? I mean, or is it always going to be some left over?
You cannot kill them all.
Can't kill them all.
That means that you cannot kill them all. So no matter how, even you treat ChemiClean in your tank every day, you cannot kill them all. All the antibiotics, none of them be able to kill them all. That is where the resistance come from. So assuming you have 10,000 bacteria, 10,000 bacteria of that species, let's say 10,000 cyanos, you kill 999 blah blah blah.
All you need is one left.
All you
to propagate.
To propagate. Just like the movie Fifth Element. So you got one single cell, then you can duplicate the whole thing. So basically, you cannot use ChemiClean or any other antibiotic to eradicate. Eradicate means that you completely wipe them out, no matter how you carpet bomb them. No, it doesn't. And that's why all this resistance start to show up. So maybe in the future that we have some cyanobacteria that is not responsible, response to ChemiClean. Probably we already have that.
In some tanks.
Seriously.
In some tanks.
Yeah, in some tanks. Some of the cyanobacteria just won't get affected by ChemiClean at all. So ChemiClean is basically more like a cosmetic surgery. So what happened is that, your in-law is coming, your girlfriend is coming, you really want your tank look pristine. Yeah, go ahead, bomb it with ChemiClean. And then after 1 week after they left, and then you're dealing with all this mess. But there is one important thing that I really don't recommend using ChemiClean a lot is many people already know that after you bomb your tank with ChemiClean, your cyano disappear and Dino take over. And then a Dino is even worse than cyano. So
let me interject a comment from Andy Bauma. He says, it seems like the ChemiClean removes it from the sand bed and allows other microorganisms to take over their niche. On the sand bed, there's always some in the water column. Do you agree with that?
Yes. Actually, that even worse is about coral farming the egg cracks. So for a coral farmer, and we frequently see the cyanobacteria covering the egg cracks. And then if you bomb it, the egg crack with ChemiClean, and then it's the Dino going to take over your egg crack. You take over basically after the cyano is dead, whatever surface, regardless is on the sand, is on the rock, on your egg crack, on your wall, on your utensil, on your fork, spoon. Well, then another species of bacteria or another species of whatever, we're going to take over that space. Because you just vacant this hotel and somebody else comes and take over.
It's like a domino effect.
Exactly. And then the thing is that after you eradicate your Dino, then your cyano come back.
So what would be your best advice for somebody that has, let's say they have a plague proportion of cyano, that it's just really bad, that it's covering all the sand, it's covering all the rocks. What would be your advice to that person in terms of trying to get that under control?
First of all, is that how much tolerance that person has for looking at ugly cyanobacteria. So if you have a patch that big and in your 180-gallon tank, somewhere sitting behind a rock, just ignore it. So
blow it away.
If it's everywhere,
blow it away.
Yeah, just blow it away, and then or just pretend you're not there,
or siphon it out.
Yeah, or siphon it out. Siphon it out actually is really effective. Actually, when you siphon the cyanobacteria out, you do not completely remove them. You just remove the top layer. So there's plenty of cyanobacteria still on that surface, occupying that surface and preventing Dino to take over, for example. So you siphon them out. Yeah, that's a good idea. Or if siphoning is really too much labor intensive, you can always get a little power head. Get a little power head, go into the tank and blow them away.
So one note about that, Dong. I was doing that, in my display tank that has cyano, and my cyano has gotten better ever since I removed my sand bed. But what I was also doing was blowing the cyano off of the sand bed and disturbing that sand bed, and my corals weren't happy in that display tank. It just seemed like I was unearthing or disturbing some stuff in that sand bed that my SPS weren't really terribly happy with. And once I got all the sand out of the tank gradually and didn't have any sand bed to blow around, it seemed like my corals started to rebound and not get as pissed off.
Yeah, that actually is pretty common. So what happened is that at the bottom of the sand bed, there's hydrogen sulfide. Because the bacteria that are living at the bottom of the sand bed, there's the place where the oxygen pool place. So the bacteria will use sulfate as the oxygen source. So the byproduct is hydrogen sulfide. So when you disturb the sand bed, you release the hydrogen sulfide. So the coral get not going to be very happy, and your fish is not going to be happy. And because all you take just a very small amount, so you probably won't smell it, but it's definitely in the water. So in that case, then you can see, the coral is not very, it looks a little bit upset. And that can happen if you disrupt your detritus. If you have a lot of them, you're removing them, and the similar effect can happen.
Oh, so if you have a lot of detritus that's building up and building up, and you disturb that detritus, then that could have the same type of effect in terms of releasing some toxins or hydrogen sulfide.
Hydrogen sulfide. Yeah.
So I mean, it is then very important, I would think, to stay on top of detritus removal.
Yes, actually, that's where the bare bottom tank really come into really easy to maintain. So what happens is that if you combine the gyre flow with the bare bottom tank, what happens is that you can find out your detritus actually collecting at the corner of the tank. They all get blown over there. You just go using a turkey baster to suck them up and done. So it's like gathering all the trash to a corner, and so you can just siphon it out.
Yeah, I mean, what's been effective for me in terms of my battle against cyano is to take the power head, go around, every other day. I do this every other day to the rocks. I blow the rocks with a power head. If there's some cyano, a little cyano on the bottom of the glass, I blow that. And so I get that all into the water column, and so my mechanical filtration helps remove it. And then I also have this marine land fluidized, I guess it's like a water polisher, like a pump that I put inside the tank, and so that'll take in some of the the cyano and other stuff that's floating around in there, the large particulate matter, and we'll filter that stuff out. And then I will also siphon whatever kind of like detritus is left over in the bottom. And it sounds like it's a pain in the ass, and it is it's work. Like every other day I'm doing like 15-20 minutes of work, but I just feel like it, I am kind of slowly winning that battle, and I think that manual removal and just trying to stay on top of that accumulating detritus has helped.
Yeah, and also water change.
Water changes.
Yeah, water change actually helps a lot. The reason for that is that when you're seeing a lot of cyano build up, there must be a problem somewhere, right? Cyano is feeding on something. So those things actually are probably in your water column, well, most likely in the water column, because it dispersed everywhere. That's where your cyano actually grabbing all this nutrient from the water column. So do a water change. And do a water change that will reduce the nutrient and then reduce the cyano.
So cyano is a bacteria, right? Cyanobacteria is a bacteria.
Yep.
It's not, so talk about Dong in terms of you talked about water changes and nutrient removal. Is that something that's always going to be effective in terms of fighting cyano if it is a bacterial issue versus a nutrient issue?
Actually, they're the same issue. So the cyano show up because that you have excess nutrient. So the saying on the internet saying that, well, that when your nutrients too poor, cyano show up, that's not the case at all. That is putting the cart in front of the horse. So because when there's a lot of cyano there, they actually take out the measurable phosphate and nitrate from your water column. But it does not mean that your water column is really clean. No, it doesn't. It actually cyanobacteria also feeding on lots of organic compounds that we cannot test. And water change is the only way to remove them because we cannot test them. But if you see cyano, I will guarantee you those organic compounds in the water column that is feeding your cyano. So the bottom line is that it's not just nitrogen and phosphorus. The nitrate phosphate is not the only thing feeding your feeding the cyano.
Yeah,
That's very important thing.
yeah, because conventional wisdom is, all right, I've got like elevated nitrates and phosphates, and I've got a cyano issue. So, all right, I need to get those phosphates and nitrates down, right? So I did that in this, situation. I got my nitrates and phosphates almost down to zero. But what happened was that some of my SPS got light, right? They faded. So that's not necessarily the solution in that case.
Nope, that's not the solution at all. And for matter of fact, when you look at SPS, the biology, on the surface of like Aquapora, they actually also many other coral as well. There is nitrate and phosphate transporter. That means that they're actively taking in nitrate and phosphate from the water column. This is a well-studied biology. So this is well established and no question asked. So that means your coral does require phosphate and nitrate. They have the transporter, just like this little arm. They're grabbing them from the water column. So to utilize them as their nutrient. So the coral that require phosphate and nitrate, and that's well established.
Yep.
Then probably people will ask, well, what about the ref-fill ratio, right? You want to talk about that?
Yeah, I put out. I had both Julian Sprung and Charles Delbake on, and I asked them that question about the red field ratio, and they didn't really think it was something that was something that people should be that concerned with in terms of
Absolutely. So red field ratio, you don't need it. And first of all, let me give you, for example, if you're eating butter and bread, okay? So you eat one loaf of bread with one slice of butter, assuming like that. So does it really matter in your refrigerator, you have 100 loaves of bread and two strips of, two pieces of butter? You still eat the same. So versus, for example, that if you have one loaf of bread in front of you, you have one piece of butter, you eat this together. Now that if I put 10 loaves of bread in front of you and 10 strips of butter in front of you, you still eat the same. What happens if I put 2,000 loaves of bread in front of you and then one cubes of butter? You still eat the same. It really doesn't matter what's available to you. You can go to grocery store, there are 10,000 loaves of bread and 10,000 sticks of butter, but you're still eating the same. You're still eating the same ratio. So, but on the other hand, that means the red field ratio in the water column is basically nonsense. Absolutely doesn't matter. Basically, is that, but on the other hand, if you have no butter, you only have tons of bread, you probably won't be very happy. Or you have tons of butter, no bread, and you're probably not going to just eat the butter, right? So that the basic idea is that in the water column or in your food pantry, just make sure you have bread and butter.
Andy Bauma is saying that usually if he has 100-to-1 ratio nitrates to phosphate, then that he won't really have cyano. What's your thoughts on that?
I think it's just observation. It's an observation. There's so many factors in play that affect that what kind of cyano situation in your tank. It just happened to be one observation. For example, that if an apple that fell off the tree outside, and then I found a dime under my carpet, are those related? Probably not. But then I can always think, oh, maybe that apple on the tree fell down. I will find a dime on the in the carpet, because I do see that happen. So correlation is not causation. So in a complex ecosystem, especially talk about reef tank, and many of the things like the cyanobacteria, Dino boom, is not caused by one or two factors. It's caused by so many different factors. But we can only see one or two. And then human being has this tendency is to draw correlations. So, but does that correlation actually is the cause? Probably not.
Gotcha.
So that's how I think that should be looked at.
Speaking of correlation, NSB Reefs is asking, any correlation with cyano and bottled bacteria? I seem to have cyano more when I dose bacteria.
Actually, that's a possibility. Because that your bottled bacteria, there will be a loss of food source in that to keep the bacteria alive. That means that loss of nutrient in those bottles. So when you dose that bottle into your tank, and basically you're putting a lot more food into the water column, well, then you see a bacterial boom. Yeah, that's a possibility. That makes sense, because some of the correlation makes sense. Some of the correlation may not make sense. So that is how, the important message I want to say is that that's where the science in play. So the science is to find out that if this observation has a correlation to what happened in certain phenomena. So that's basically that's what the science is that we see something, and then we see another thing. Do they have a relationship? That's very, very important of science. So, but we don't draw the conclusion, say, okay, well, the apple fell, I find a dime on my carpet, that is correlated. No, we cannot draw that conclusion. But the thing is that if somebody outside your window toss you a dime, then I find that dime on my carpet. Yes, that is a correlation.
That correlates.
Because it makes sense. Yeah, it is.
Well, there's bottle bacteria out there that are marketed as algae fighters. I think one of the things that you see marketed is that this bottle bacteria will help fight red algae. This bottle bacteria will help fight brown algae. What are your thoughts on using bottle bacteria like that?
Actually, there's one example that the bottle bacteria to fight algae, it turned out to be not bacterial at all. So that's well known, right? So it's algae in a bottle instead of bacteria. So this basically thing is that how can you make this claim saying that, okay, that I have this bottle of bacteria, you only chew up the thing we don't want, but leave the thing that we want. And the thing we don't want and the thing we want are pretty similar. That's basically, I call it a marketing, or maybe aqua equalizer. If you watch Reef Beef,
yeah.
If you talk to Rich Ross and Ben Johnson, and then they will tell you what the aqua equalizer is. So I will treat that bottles of bacteria as an aqua equalizer version 2. So the best way that bottles of bacteria belong is the trash can or dumpster. Seriously, you don't waste money on it.
Are there any benefits to dosing bottle bacteria to an established reef tank? In your opinion?
Yes and no.
Yes and no.
So basically, most of the bottle bacteria, they are those are denitrification bacteria that you already have tons of.
Right.
And but on the other hand, that coral does feed on bacteria. That's for sure. That's true. So if you dump a bottle of bacteria, you spend $10, you buy the bottle of bacteria, you dump it in your tank, and then your SPS did not die the next morning. Well, that's pretty good. No problem. And then you feel like, oh, I just feed a $10 meal to my SPS. Fine. But if you buy a bottle of bacteria, you dump in your tank, and the next morning that one of the coral die, and that is a problem, right? But I believe that most of the bottle bacteria, they're pretty safe. Seriously. So, yeah.
I guess the key question, Dong, is do you dose bacteria to your tanks, to your mature reef tanks?
No.
No. Okay.
the one important thing is that because I know how fast bacteria grow, the thing is that there is really no need to replenish bacteria because they grow so fast. And also the other thing is that we're thinking about how pure are those bottle bacteria and what exactly they are. Because the bacteria can have beneficial effect, also can be harmful. You really don't know.
Well,
and also that by spending $10, $20 to buy a bottle of bacterial, that to believe this bacterial is very pure and does not contain harmful pathogen in it, I don't believe it, because that to get pure bacteria is not that cheap.
what about dosing bottle bacteria to increase the diversity of the bacteria in your system?
Okay, now this is a wonderful question. First, I like to rock some boat. Okay, we always believe in biodiversity. The more, the better. I question that. Is it really that where that concept come from? Normally, the concept come from is that we try to mimic the ocean. That is a fundamental concept. And the ocean, actually, ocean water. I remember I read somewhere in a magazine, science magazine or something like that. You said the ocean water is the dirtiest water on the surface of Earth because there's so much bacteria, so much pathogen inside. So now, actually, when you think about it this way, first of all, do we need to duplicate the nature with our aquaculture coral? So all these bacterial and virus, fungi, and parasites in the ocean water that make up this biodiversity are really helpful. So let me give you one example, the way how I think about it. Okay, this is an apple, okay? This is a modern day apple. Got the market basket, pretty good, okay? So try to imagine this. Let's roll the time back 10,000 years ago.
Whoa.
10,000 years ago, and then a human being are pretty in sync with nature because they're surrounded by nature. Now try to imagine this apple 10,000 years ago. It's going to be a wild apple. You will have a lot more biodiversity on the surface of the apple. Alongside with all the food, the hygiene at that time, there will be a lot more biodiversity for human being at the time, from the environment. What's the average lifespan? 20 years.
For you, for a human.
Yeah, for human.
Yeah.
Right now, we're looking at 70, 80, 90. Okay? If you look at our living condition, our living condition has our living environment, your bed, your room, the food you eat, the apple you eat, well, organic apple especially, it actually has much, much less biodiversity. So basically, what antibiotics do? Antibiotics revolutionize the whole human being lifespan. Seriously, just roll back 100 years ago. And if you look at the human lifespan, how we conquer all the disease and how we make the healthy human is when the antibiotic was invented and found and discovered. So that changed our living environment. That make people live a much healthier life. But what is the actual effect? The actual effect is that we have a decreased biodiversity in our living environment. Okay, now, so let me give you another example. Now I drop this apple on the floor. 5-second rules, right? If you go to Asian country, you drop this apple on the floor, nobody's gonna eat it.
Nobody's gonna eat it.
No, nobody's gonna eat
After
it. There's
5
no
seconds,
5-second
there's no
rule.
5-second rule.
No 5-second rule. Immediately, this apple will go into the sink, get washed, and cleaned up before people eat it. And actually, there's when I was a kid, that when I watched the Western movie, when people eat apple, they do this, see, and this, and then they start eating it. This is absolutely unbelievable in China. Absolutely unbelievable. You over there, there's a lot more biodiversity for bacteria, for virus in the environment. You have to wash your vegetable. You have to wash your fruit before you eat it. No 5-second rule, because here, if you drop it on the street, 5-second rule probably still apply. That is because here
Depends what street.
Of course, not the New York City, right, in the middle of the city, right? So then the difference is that the major point is that when your apple drop to a less biodiverse surface, it actually safer to eat. Let's go back to the reef tank. So clownfish, the wild clownfish has a much shorter lifespan than the captive clownfish. Of course, that if you don't have accidentally exposed to egg or kill them, whatever thing. So in general, captive bred clownfish in a reef tank has a much longer lifespan than they're in the wild. When you compare the reef tank to the ocean, not only there's much less biodiversity in the reef tank, also much less predators. Actually, predator also should be considered as a biodiversity, as a part of component. That's something that eat you. So that is the thing is that, do we really need biodiversity in order for the coral to thrive? So if you talk about a captive animal, cats and dogs actually, you can see that your puppy probably live a longer life than the coyote outside. Why is that? Because your puppy go to the doctor, you pay for the vet, and then the puppy drink clean water, they eat healthy food, which all have the one important thing: less biodiversity. And now let's talk about bacteria. This is a bottle I opened yesterday. When I was in grad school, there's a project for chemistry class. They study that if you open a bottle of water, then the bacteria start to rapidly multiply in there. The conclusion is that after 8 hours, merely 8 hours, this water is undrinkable because the amount of bacteria in here. So same thing happened to the reef tank. So the bacterial growth is such a rapid, they grow so rapid. For example, they double the colony in 4 to 8 hours, something like that. So in that case, that whatever bacteria in your tank will replenish itself just overnight. So when you get your car key, get in your car, drive to the pet shop, buy that bacteria in a bottle, the bacteria in your tank already double. Exactly.
So you're saying the diversity of adding bottled bacteria is not necessarily going to help things.
Yes, absolutely. First of all, it's not necessarily can help things. Second, it can be potentially introduce more pathogenic bacteria in there. So the thing is that if your coral is happy, sit back, relax, enjoy the tank. Don't complicate the environment. So complicating environment always can lead to one consequence is that it's destroy the environment.
So we're going to talk about coral nutrition in terms of coral feeding and how to make them happier. But I want to get to a super chat question by Arturo Reef. Thank you so much for that super chat. And the question is, and we talked about this before in this live stream, I might have talked about this with you, Dong, but can Dong talk about his opinion on RTN and STN, and is this bacteria related? And let me just give you a little bit more insight from Arturo Reef. My problem, every time I go on vacation, I have STN. Only difference I saw pH 8.63 pH high side. That's pretty high pH. Usually mine sits around. Usually it sits around 8.5. No other parameters changed. Actually, tank was more stable in terms of temp and salt, everything else. So yeah, I mean, I guess just quick summary, Dong, in terms of RTN and STN. What can you tell folks out there in terms of the causes of that, and I guess the main question is this bacteria related?
First of all, if you have RTN, rapid tissue necrosis, okay, in that case, that something is wrong. So it can be bacteria related, it can be light related, or you can just get stung by the neighbor, or you can be just some fish rub on it. Yeah, that will cause that the rapid tissue necrosis too. So there is so many causes for RTN and STN. It's very difficult to narrow it down to one or two reasons there. So basically, the diagnostic tool is just not there, not at a hobby level. We don't process this kind of equipment, technology to correctly identify this. So when you have something, if you have, let's say if you have 100 coral, one coral RTN, so what? That happen all the time. It happened to me too. I wake up in the morning, somebody dead. So after, if I have see 1,000 frag, one die, I grab it out, toss it in the trash can, and go on my day. Okay. So, but if you have 30 coral, 15 of them die, rapid tissue necrosis. And at that moment, that is something's wrong. When that thing happens, it's almost impossible to nail down exactly what happened. It could be bacterial. It could be there's some heavy metal get dropped into the tank, or maybe your heater is broken. There's so many important things. So many things can make that happen. In this case, what we can do, we can only react to what we have seen and what is available to us. In this kind of thing, a situation happen, what is available to us? Water change, water change, water change. Because that water is like the blood for coral. Only difference is that we have a blood inside, wrapped inside, and then coral have the blood also outside. So another thing is that when your water become poisonous, what you're going to do, you're not going to sit around and grab a microscope out and send out ICP test. Too late. So you should grab a bucket, a bottle, change as much water as possible. Of course, you have to examine if your heater is broken. If you're using some power head, also broken or leaking electricity. So when you rule all of them out, do your water change. For matter of fact, don't even rule them out. Do the water change first.
And another thing to check is pests. Pests.
Well,
like, you get acro-eating flatworms, that can cause a little STN on corals.
Yes, but acro-eating flatworm will not suddenly cause multiple different species coral RTN together.
Yeah.
So of course that treating the pests is always the first priority. So, but also that the pests are easy to see. So those kind of things is that if it's RTN, for matter of fact, here's the thing. If you see aqua-eating flatworm, they actually have preference of different type of coral, like aquapora. Their preference. Some of the aqua will never have aqua-eating flatworm, and some coral just no matter what, if you look at it, you get infested.
Tricolors.
For example, tricolor. And, $500 effluent.
Yeah.
That's another thing.
It's a
so
magnet.
All these purple thing, yeah. So if you just look at it, the aqua-eating flatworm just start to stick on it. So here's the thing. If you find a coral, let's say 1 out of 20 coral you have is going to RTN, and you look at it, you find aqua-eating flatworm, you actually should breathe a sign of relief. Thank God. That's the cause. It's not because my water has problem. The worst nightmare is the water has problem. That is the hardest to deal with.
Right. It's like the invisible. It's the invisible foe there.
Yeah, and also that foe hit everybody.
Yeah. So
there's that it doesn't discriminate against what type of coral. So it just hit everybody. It's just that this coral will die today and that will die tomorrow, or maybe this one will last a little bit longer. But all of them will get affected. That is the worst nightmare. But in this case, whenever we see something happen, you see this coral dead and you put it out, no flatworm, and you see the other coral is not very happy. Well, your best tool at your disposal is water change. Of course, that you have to make sure your heater is not broken, and then it's not accidental. You have 10 pennies from your kid that just dropped in your reef tank. That's an entirely different story.
That's no good.
Right? That's no good. and so change water immediately. Don't wait for ICP test. Don't wait for anything.
What's a safe number? What's a safe number? 50%? Is that too?
I think that probably 40% at one shot.
Okay.
So, for example, you change 40%, and then of course, that if in an emergency situation, you see if you have 30 acro and that 25 of them is dying. Well, in that case, probably the better way to toss them out and restart the tank. We're just kidding. So when that happens, you probably want to look at changing more than 50 or 60, 70% of water. Just like Richard Ross said, well, if you have a carbon monoxide poisoning in your garage, so do you open the garage door immediately all open, or you just open 10% of the time?
You both doors wide open.
Wide open.
Yeah.
So your water change immediately happen. That is why there's a very interesting, very important trick that I learned over the years. Always have clean seawater, well mixed, available to you. Always have that. What happened that if that water sit there for 1 month, you didn't get a use, toss them out and start a new one. So, but always have clean water, clean seawater, readily mixed, available. Actually, is really helpful. You never know what's going to happen. So, but you always have this backup. For example, you accidentally drop your water in your tank, and then the 100 copper penny fell into the tank. So in that case, you immediately scoop them up, do your water change. And then at that moment, you really appreciate that you have this 20 gallon of water sitting there. It's already well mixed and at room temperature.
Yeah.
So that actually is a very easy, simple, but useful safeguard. Just like your emergency aid, your fire extinguisher sitting there, always ready.
Yeah. So we got Alex Correa in the chat, and he is always very verbose in his comments, and I appreciate that, Alex. But he's got an interesting question for you, Dong. Dong, can you please talk about some of your observations and the relationship between RTN and STN on acros in regards to excess nutrients? Is there any causation there? Correlation?
Excess nutrient. Well, it's very difficult to say. It depends on what kind of nutrient you actually be able to observe. For matter of fact, majority of the so-called nutrient, basically we can say those are the organic compound that is in the water column, which the coral does not like. Let's say, how about this definition should be pretty appropriate, is that the organic compound in the water column that coral does not like. The problem is that the method we be able to use to test them is almost non-existent. We can only test the nitrate and phosphate. So in that case, that basically that majority of the toxic compound, the compound that coral does not like, we have no way to test them. That's the biggest problem about that so-called high nutrient, low nutrient. So your phosphate and nitrate is not an indicator of the nutrient level in your seawater. It's only the two parameters we be able to test at the hobby scale test kit. That is unfortunately, that's the fact. 99% of them saying that if we take coral in the water column, we have no way to test them.
So not even ICP testing?
No, ICP test only tests inorganic elements. All these irritants, for example, one typical example is chemical warfare. And then the compound, the toxic compound that generated by coral to suppress the other coral growth or even make it toxic to kill other coral, those kind of things. Chemical warfare happen all the time. But those chemical warfare, the compound, we have no way to test them. And actually, they're a lot more lethal. Well, yeah, there is a less appropriate example here. Let's say, look at your anemone. So anemone, on anemone, there's millions of stinger cells on the anemone. For example, that if you wake up in the morning, look in your tank, you see your beloved purple tank dead. Well, you maybe got stung by the anemone. That can happen. You have no way to test how much this nematocysts, those stinger cells in the water. No, you cannot test them. For example, if your anemone walk into your power head, voila, chemical warfare like a nuclear bomb. All these stinger cells just spread all over your tank. We don't have test kit for it. What we have, we grab a nitrate test kit, get a phosphate test kit, test them. Oh, it seems to be normal because that all these deadly weapon, deadly thing in your water that is murder your fish are not testable. So in this situation, what can you do?
Yeah.
Water change. Yeah, again, just change the water, get them out. So just blanketly get them out. That's why water change is the cure all. Seriously, just like an ICP test. Look at your Triton ICP test. Yeah, this element is elevated. What are you gonna do? Water change. This element is probably not sufficient, and there's no single element for you to dose. What's the recommendation? Water change. Is water change basically water change is like replacing the air. For example, that you have a gas leak. What do? Open your window, air change. You don't grab a test kit to test your air. Say, oh, this happened. Well, wait a minute. I only have a carbon dioxide monitor, which the carbon dioxide is perfectly fine. That's the only tool I have. Does it mean that those natural gas in the air that is not there? No, it's there. And then what are you going to do? Open up the window. Otherwise, the consequence is pretty serious. So that's why that in our hobby, the tool available to us to test our water is so limited. That actually will skew our perception about what's in the water. So basically, our tank water, no matter what kind of test kit, what kind of machine you have, is still a black box. That means the majority of the stuff inside the fish tank, we cannot test. If a problem happens, change your water.
Well, Dong, what are your feelings on people that don't do water changes, that essentially will utilize trace elements and miners to replenish, get the elements in sync with where they, should be in terms of, let's say, natural seawater or whatever you're doing in terms of ICP testing? There are certain methods out there that call for dosing these trace elements on a regular basis and not necessarily needing to do water changes. Is that something that you're not a believer in?
Actually, well, I don't think it's a very good method to do it, but it definitely works for many people. But it all depends on what kind of coral you are keeping. And also that it does not avoid, what we're talking about earlier is about that when something wrong happens.
Right.
So, for example, that if you have anemone walk into a powerhead, those no water change folks still have to change water. There's no other way around, right? But for regular maintenance, so as long as the major parameter like alkalinity, calcium, magnesium, well, pH. So Chris will really love that. Yeah, pH. To mention, yeah, pH is actually pretty important. So the part of the parameter, and then if all those things in line, in check, I think the coral will be happy enough for hobbyists. But if you're talking about farming coral to squeeze the last drop of the growth potential out of a coral, I don't believe that. I don't believe that you are able to provide exactly the level of all the element that the coral needed at that level. Why is that? First of all, we don't know most of the elements do. What they do. You go on a website and say, okay, vanadium. Yeah, vanadium. Everybody loves that thing. What does it do? You have a description say, oh, you help your coral grow. You blah, blah, blah. But where's the scientific evidence? Where's the study? Where it shows that you do anything? So that's the problem is that, yeah, and all this description is so vague. Oh, you help the coral growth. Everything help the coral growth. I can toss a piece of tuna in my tank. You help the coral growth. Yes, that's the important thing. Second thing is that what is the optimal level? Do you know? Nobody knows. Why is that? There is no scientific literature on that subject. There maybe is important, but then nobody actually do the study yet. We don't know. What is the optimal level? Is the water, the sea level is the optimal level? Now we go back to the question, which part of the sea you're talking about? Are you talking about Red Sea? Are you talking about that little pool on the Great Barrier Reef? Are you talking about that little pool 1 mile away from the Great Barrier Reef? Are you talking about the little piece of ocean that closer to the shore? Are you talking about the some kind of part of ocean in the African lake? They're all different. And also, are you talking about 5 meter deep? Are you talking about 3 feet deep? Are you talking about 20 feet deep? Even the salinity is different.
There's a lot of variables in play, huh?
Exactly. There is no natural level. Basically, period. No natural level. Natural level is not a set level. It depends on location. And even that reminds me that what is the optimal temperature for fish? Actually, the fish will well, the different depths of water have a different temperature. The fish go from 72 degree, go down to 69 degree, go back to 78 degree, go to 82 degree when they surface the water. What is the optimal temperature for fish? It doesn't exist. And what's the optimal parameter of the ocean? Which part of the ocean? Show me that part of the ocean. It doesn't exist. We talk about this ocean, the parameter is different. Then that ocean, parameter is different. But all the ocean where the coral grows, there's several consistency. The alkalinity is pretty similar. The calcium level is pretty similar. The magnesium level, yeah, is pretty similar. So the variation is not that big, and we know about that. So that's how we form the basis about dosing this element. So that means that when your alkalinity is fine, your calcium is fine, your magnesium is fine, forget about vanadium. So, and then the coral you treasure most may not live in that piece of water that has a lot of vanadium there. It doesn't. So that the bottom line is that don't worry about this kind of thing. And also another thing is that how do you be able to accurately measure this tiny small amount? It doesn't. So all these tests has limitations. So how big the limitation is? Let me give you one example. I want you to use this bottle to measure 1 gram of sodium chloride for me. Can you do that? No, you cannot. That's exactly what ICP do. They will tell you something, but is it really? No, it's not. So basically, just like you use a 5-gallon bucket, try to measure 1 ounce of sugar. You cannot do that. So when that thing fell apart, other things all fall apart. So all the fundamental scientific common sense fall apart. Only one sense that doesn't fall apart is profit margin. I promote some kind of technology, you use it, you pay me for it, I benefit for it, I just decorate it more. So it seems like you cannot live without it. That is called capitalism. That is marketing. Especially for hobby, there is no regulatory body to regulate this kind of thing. That go back to aqua equalizer. So we should really talk to Richard Ross. Let's look at this aqua equalizer. That's basically the same thing. Or the infrared powder.
I mean, listen, yeah, I'm keeping track of the comments here. Ari, I'm emptying my car to captivate trace elements now. You know, I mean, listen, I use the trace element methodology in terms of ICP testing and dosing trace elements. You know, my corals are very happy. You know, and things look very happy and healthy. I think an interesting point to raise is that there is no cookie cutter way to run a reef tank.
Yes.
Right.
Yep.
And I think there are many different methodologies. I think what you're saying, Dong, is that you'd like to see more scientific evidence for a lot of the products out there in terms of the benefits and what have you. But I think it is important to say that there are many different mousetraps to successfully keep a reef tank.
But also, this is a hobby.
Yep.
So hobby should have a fun factor. So basically, I'm speaking on a viewpoint of a scientist.
Yep.
How I look at these products. But on the other hand, if I look at all these products as a hobbyist, now the thing can be different. For example, if I send out ICP tests, I look at the test, all the results all green, I feel better. Yeah.
Gives you a warm, fuzzy
Seriously.
glow.
Exactly. What a hobby is to give you this warm, fuzzy glow. If you think I dose some vanadium in there, as long as I don't kill my fish, and then I feel better. I perceive the coral grows better, more colorful. Why not? Because that it doesn't cost much. If I want to follow one method versus the other method as a hobbyist, nothing wrong with it because it's a hobby. You are entitled to do whatever you feel like to make you happy to do. Well, provided you are not hurting the animal. But the good thing is that all these methods out there, none of them actually will lead to like a tank failure or anything.
Right.
The worst thing they can do is that nothing.
Right.
It doesn't help. It doesn't do anything worse. But on the other hand, since there's so little scientific study on a lot of these trace elements, well, there's a chance this trace element does help, right? And that's the idea is that you just haven't been discovered yet.
I think there's a lot of anecdotal evidence out there, and
Yes.
right, and we don't have the at least I'm not aware of it. Maybe and it seems like you're not aware of the scientific proof or the studies that back
Yes.
that up. Maybe there are out there, and we're not privy.
My question is that do we really need the scientific backup? Because there's always a psychological effect in any hobby. So the funny thing is that just like my psychological skimmer, that even though it does nothing at all, but having that skimmer running there make me feel ease. But then I try to break my comfort zone and then I take it off. But
The
then
psychological
actually
skimmer.
Yeah, but I put it back
Oh, you did?
right now. Yeah, I put it back because it doesn't make me feel very good. So even though I know probably it does nothing, but having it running there, it makes me happy. That's the important thing.
Yep.
For example, also there's another psychological effect. So this is my homemade iodine. So basically, I just drop about 10 mils in my tank every day. Do I see anything different? For matter of fact, I do. Because right after I drop this iodine in my tank, all the coral become more colorful. Seriously, human psychological effect exists. But well, even though I don't overdose this kind of thing, but I feel better. The coral looks prettier right after dosing because even though I know this not real, okay, but it's psychological. But as a hobbyist, as a hobby, why not? If this bottle cost me $10,000, hell no. So this cost me 10 cents. Why not?
Yeah, why not?
But of course, I won't overdose it to kill my coral because I know that if it dose too much, that potentially have consequence. So also happen to all these trace elements. For matter of fact, that's Chris Magny had brought up a very important thing. Are these trace elements is for coral or for the bacteria?
Right.
For matter of fact, that when I'm doing literature research, I found more evidence that the trace element due to the bacteria than coral. But the bacteria also make up the whole biome in your tank. Maybe there is not the dosing trace element has nothing to do with your coral. Maybe you help the bacteria somehow help it a little bit. Well, the bottom line is that I don't follow this trace element method, but I can say my coral is as colorful as many people who does that.
I concur.
Evidence, right?
I've seen that in person.
Yeah, but on the other hand, there's one major secret here. You know, this water, they're not RODI. They're all tap water. Yeah, very shocking though. I tell everybody this is tap water. Then, since this is tap water, it has a lot of fluoride in it. Even I don't dose fluoride, I maybe have more than enough fluoride. If you use RODI, you may need to dose fluoride. That's a possible thing. Since I don't use RODI, this is tap water, it has a lot more trace element that add to the tank than when you use RODI. Can that be a factor for this coral to grow like this and to have the color? It's absolutely possible.
Yeah.
Right?
Yeah.
So, but the bottom line is that whatever works for you is the correct way, as long as you don't kill the coral to do some damage. Not throwing 100 penny in your tank.
Yeah, I'm not confident in my tap water where I'm at, but
actually, that is absolutely true, 100% true. It highly depends on which town you live in. So because that our tap water is generated by the town, we have our own water plant, we have our own power plant, and we have our own fiber optic. By the way, we cannot use any fiber optic. Only thing we can use is the one that's provided by the town. Okay, so it's how
sounds like a monopoly.
Yeah, exactly. But we do have very good water. Seriously, that's one thing. So that's why I won't recommend people to use tap water because it highly depends on your town. So I'd be able to use that because I live in this town, and also because since 2004, I've been using the same tap water. It has been well proven. I have people come out to my garden hose to take this water to mix up their salt.
Oh, that's your special water? That's your special water?
Oh, yeah, the town.
I thought they're coming grabbing your salt water. They're coming grabbing your tap water?
They also grab my salt water.
Okay.
Both. yeah, the tap water, just go out and just open the sprinkler. Just feel free. So I do give away my salt water. That way, force myself to do water change. So that also go back to the water change or no water change method. Here's the interesting thing is that if everything goes well, you probably don't need to do a lot of water change. Seriously. For example, that what I found out is that this is another anecdotal observation, not a correlation, not a scientific study, is that the more coral I find out in a system, the probably less water change you can do. Why is that? My hypothesis is that your coral is a nutrient export. The more coral you have a more nutrient export. So that means the loss of this organic get removed out of the water column. So your water probably is cleaner.
Well, the folks that saw the video that I did did a little tour of your facility there, Dong. Part 1 we put out about a week or two ago, and part 2 is coming out soon. But in that part 1 video, you talked about using Xenia and bubble tip anemones as a sources of nutrient export.
Yep, it's very effective. Because the Xenia is really growing like a pest. But we can always utilize the pests. Actually, back like 15 or something more than that, long time ago, that the co-founder of Unique Coral.
Joe Capriata?
The other one.
Feldman? Yeah, Feldman?
Yeah, Feldman. Yeah. He gave a talk at Boston Reefers Society that back so many years ago. He talked about using Aptasia as a nutrient export. The reason is that they grow so rapidly. GSP is a good nutrient export. Well, I think GSP probably doesn't grow fast enough. But Xenia, yes. And also the bubble tip anemone. Oh my God. I try to clear them out. It seems like I have more and more. So all these fast growing coral, they can be utilized as part of nutrient export.
Yeah.
Because they do fix all these organic and organic nutrients locked in their body and become like the Xenia, bubble tip, and then I just give away the potent Xenia.
Yep.
So I remember one time that a lady came over. I gave her half 5-gallon bucket full of potent Xenia by harvesting, and she was so happy. I was so happy because I know that I get rid of so much nutrient from the tank, and she got so much Xenia, and then she can have a full tank of Xenia. Xenia is pretty, seriously. It is very pretty. They actually move by themselves. They have a nerve system. They snap around. So
it's pretty cool.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. But as long as they're on their own island, own tank, perfectly fine.
Yeah, you don't want to take over. Rob upstate New York, thanks very much, man, for the super chat. The question is, Dong, on a smaller 60-gallon mixed reef cube, what's best? 5-gallon water changes weekly or 20 gallons per month? I do 5-gallon weekly. Is this useless and a waste of money? Question mark.
Actually, I think that the more frequent water change probably is better.
So smaller, more frequent.
Actually, it's not about the amount; it's about the frequency. So, of course, that you can do a larger amount more frequent is always better than smaller amount more frequent. So, it's based on one theory: is that a lot of this harmful organic substance like the coral warfare and those chemicals started or waste, organic waste, start to build up in the tank, right? Like any compound, organic compound, that they have to reach certain concentration so that they can have a biological effect. For example, that copper, right? I just said this is not organic compound, but let's just say copper. Copper is required at very small amount, but that is beneficial. If you have zero copper, then your coral going to die. So, but when you have too much copper, your coral going to die. So copper becomes bad when you reach certain concentration. Every time you do a water change, you effectively lower all these harmful materials concentration, lower. So you can potentially make them less, doesn't reach the concentration that can have a bad biological effect. So basically all these compounds keep building up. And then, for example, that if you reach here, then your coral gonna die. So now after your water change, now this compound started coming up. Then you do another water change, it come down again. And then it will build up again. And then you do a frequent water change, whoop, you go down again. So even though this compound always in your water column, but they're always at a lower concentration than the concentration they can have bad effect. So if you do once a month, then you talk about, okay, now the coral can suffer, boom, going back down. And then you build up again, coral suffer again, you bring it down again. But now, you can have the potential to over the harmful concentration that your coral going to suffer. So that is why the more frequent water change is always beneficial, more beneficial than the large water change in a long period of time. That's where this automatic water change thing actually I think is pretty cool. If I think the automatic water change, but daily water change actually that is really a good method.
Those things kind of scare me because it's automated, and being automated means that something can go wrong. I don't know. You're not an automated guy, Dong. I know that, man. You're all manual, right?
Nope. I lock 5-gallon bucket.
Yeah.
But actually, I do daily water change.
Yeah, but that's manual. That's manual.
Huh?
That's manual.
Oh, manual. That's why I encourage people to come get my water.
So Dong, we started out talking about how to start a reef tank in terms of cycling and all that stuff, and then we took a major diversion. But just quickly, and then I don't know if we have time to talk about coral feeding or not, but just quickly in terms of what would you say should come first, fish or corals after you cycle?
Coral first.
Coral first.
So because coral is much more resilient than fish, actually. Well, I'm talking about aquaculture coral. So when we talk about wild coral or mariculture coral, hell no. But that is not going to work. Aquaculture coral is genetically different than the wild and mariculture coral. They're more robust.
LPS or
more
SPS?
tolerable.
LPS or SPS first?
Actually, SPS. Because many of the LPS, the aquaculture LPS, you have a lot less selection. For example, you got aquaculture frog spawn, hammer, and Duncan. What else that actually be able to sustain but not very fragile? So
Duncan,
yeah. Duncan, Scully, out of the question. All the Scully are wild. Mid coral, give me a break. $1,000 that piece of thing, right from the ocean.
No way.
So no. But SPS, you have a lot more choice. Monty Cap, oh my God, I cannot even give them away. They grow so fast. You can see them just occupying all the space. So and then bird's nest, Montipora digita, all sorts of color, bright color. Green slimer as an acro. Those things are so robust and grow fast. And also, another important thing is that coral eat the ammonia. Fish suffer from ammonia. Coral actually happy to consume the ammonia.
So you don't need to have that tank cycle before adding coral?
No. You have to get a cycle first. The cycle is not just for dropping your ammonia to zero. No, it's not that simple. It also is a process, very important to let all the biomix to sort of have some kind of establishment. So even 1 or 2 months makes a huge difference there. So then that makes, before the tank is cycled, which means that the nitrate takes over, your ammonia is zero, that is a step that you cannot skip. You have to go through that. But also during that stage, you're actually allowing the biomix to establish, the environment to establish. So patience is the key. So if you add coral to an uncycled tank, no matter what kind of coral add to it, you're killing them. So that's why that when the tank is cycled with the light on, important thing, with the light just set as it's supposed to be. Then you start adding some hardy, easy SPS, something $5, $10 kind of thing, something die, you don't, doesn't break your bank, and it's aquaculture, the coral reef doesn't get harmed. If you put a scolia in there, yeah, you are actually harming the coral reef, seriously, because that thing was yanked off the reef and go, probably 10 of his companions already dead before he reached the wholesaler, and then another 5 of his companions died to reach the retailer and go to your tank. A tank is not cycle, great. And now there's probably 100 scolia die in this process.
What's the best way to cycle the tank?
Best way is bacterial, actually.
Dose the denitrifying bacteria.
Yeah, just because of that is also well established. Of course, it's not like the TV show, the tank, right? The TV show, just 1 gallon of this bacterial pour in there at your fish. That's absolutely BS. Okay, that is really bad practice. But use the bacteria to cycle your tank. It's well established, well studied. Nothing wrong with that. It's much better using your raw shrimp. And all it does is that you jumpstart the tank. Just pour your bacteria in, let them settle on your rock and start to multiply. Voila! And that is the best way to cycle your tank.
Gotcha. So it is a myth then, but a lot of people, you hear a lot of people say that reef tank's not ready for SPS until 7 or 8 months. Myth?
I don't think that's true. Well, even you have a tank is 1 year old, it's probably still not ready for wild and marine culture SPS, acro, that's what I mean. Seriously, those kind of things, the survival rate is so low, they're very difficult to adapt to the captive environment. Even you have a 2-year reef tank, you still have a lot of mortality of wild SPS. What I'm talking about is that aquaculture SPS.
Right. Dong, do we have time to talk about coral feeding, or should we?
Sure. Yeah. I have all the time you can have.
All right. So we talked about a bunch of stuff. We talked about dosing bacteria as a food source, and you did mention that there is a possibility that corals could be benefiting from that because there are bacteria that live on the corals, so perhaps that is a potential benefit in terms of adding the bacteria. But I think also what I got out of what you had said before, Dong, is that there are so many bacteria already in the tank, and dosing different bacteria that are in the tank might not necessarily help. So I guess the jury is still out in terms of dosing bacteria as a food source for corals, even though we do know that corals do consume bacteria, right? So,
yes.
Okay, I got that right. What about we've talked about this before with when you were on. I can't remember exactly when. The use of live phytoplankton.
Okay.
How beneficial is that for coral nutrition?
I think it's the basic pyramid, the bottom of the pyramid for the whole food net inside your reef tank. So how important it is basically it should be bread and butter. It's that important. So I dose phyto. I don't dose 1 ounce, 2 ounce. I just pour. I grab that 1 gallon, actually the 1 gallon jug, and just boom, pour into it. Actually, I pour on top of my clams.
Oh yeah.
so they got a little bit more chance to capture those. So I pour enough that I have a section that with several giant clam, 1 baby, 1 very big one, and 1 medium. I pour enough phyto in there. That section is green. Is that
green
much.
On the glass, or green in the water?
Green in the water. Yep, and that is how much I feed them. So basically, it's really difficult to overfeed phyto. So one time I find out that I may be overfeeding phyto is that I started seeing the phyto show up on the glass.
Some residue.
No, they actually grow on it.
Grow on it.
Yeah, and then I just grab a razor blade and scrape them off and feed the tank again.
So the corals, and we're talking SPS in particular here, are not necessarily consuming the phyto, but the organisms lower on the food chain are, and so that's kind of fueling life in the reef tank, so to speak. That's providing food for the corals to eat down the line.
Yes,
Okay.
absolutely true. And actually, it's well studied that like Aquapora, they don't eat phyto. That because that there have been enough study done on that. Aquapora actually is mostly a meat eater.
and what phyto is doing is promoting the growth of pods, right?
Yeah.
Copepods, anthropods. And
not only pods, also your sponge. And all sorts of tiny little life form that then they're happy growing and they spawn. When they spawn, they spill out all these tiny particles. So those kind of things are meaty substance. They're meaty. They actually get consumed by coral.
So a couple questions about phyto. Rich Colombo, should we shut the skimmer off when dosing? And I'll add another part to that. What about UV?
I think that you don't have to. Well, I don't turn off my skimmer because I'm lazy. And I really don't see too much a difference there. I just pour. In terms of UV, because I don't run UV, I cannot answer that question. So, but one thing I do know is that most of the hobby grade UV, they're pathetically low in power. So they probably doesn't do anything at all. So,
well, you mentioned aquabiomics. I do run UV in my systems, and the tests that I've gotten back from those guys, Eli has said, like, well, it's obvious you're running UV because there's certain bacteria that are not showing up in your profile that would show up if you were not running UV.
Actually, because you're a pro, you're running the good stuff.
Okay. My UVs are pumping out enough juice there. So Andy's asking, how often does Dong dose phyto? And I guess I'll add to that, how often and how much?
So basically, whenever I feel like generously, I just pour. Because seriously, you do not have to do it on a schedule. And then the thing is that, and you do not have to dose a particular amount. Basically, how do you determine how much phyto you need? There's no way to determine that because that each tank has different bioload. The different kind of, the live rock is different. The animal live on the live rock is different. And also the amount of sponge in your sum are different. And then the amount of coral and the coral species is different. How can anybody give you a number? Absolutely impossible.
Hold it, man. You gave me a number.
Well, because I pulled it out of my head. Because I know the number I give you is to make sure you dose more than enough.
Right. And what was that number? I don't know off the top of my head. I dose, so to both of my systems, one of my systems is 446 gallons. The other system is like 349 gallons. I think I dose like 22 ounces a day to each of those systems.
I think it's pretty low.
You think that's
probably
low?
1 ounce per 25 to 50 gallons of water, depending on your.
Yeah, no, I went above your recommendations. I think I did.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
For me, it's that I'm getting so lazy. I just started pouring.
Well, the problem is, Dong, you got to raise a lot of phyto to just keep pouring it in there, right? I mean, I'm doing like 4 1.5 gallon plastic jugs of phyto a week. I'm growing.
Well, that's what I do. Is I enlist the help of fellow reefers.
Oh.
I give them store credit for their phyto.
Oh, so you're taking in phyto.
Yeah, I take in phyto. So every week, by the end of the week, I probably have a little bit left.
Oh, okay.
So
well, you got like what, 1,700 gallons in terms of your total systems, 2,000 gallons?
Yeah, something like that. So probably consume about 4 gallons of Phyto at least
Yeah.
a week.
Yeah, Rub Upstate New York, Dong is growing his own Phyto. I know that. And
Yeah.
but you're taking in others because you
Yeah,
need
yeah.
more.
Otherwise, plus that I sell some of the Phyto, so there's not. I don't sell a lot seriously in terms of Phyto, but majority is all consumed by my tank.
Live Phyto versus products out there that are non-live. Let's say non-live Phyto products. What are your thoughts on non-live Phyto products?
I actually started with non-live Phyto products because they're easy, cheap, simple. You don't see the same benefit at all. So I think that one of the important things about Phyto, the living Phyto, actually they reduce your nutrient too. Because one time, one of my raceway sprung a leak. Okay, so I took it down, clean it, fill it back up, and then all my egg crate is covered with Dino, all the new surface. So what I do, I learned from a coral farm. I started pouring 1 gallon of Phyto every night in a 120-gallon raceway.
Wow.
Yes. And after, I forget, maybe 1 week or 2 weeks, all the Dino gone.
So you just smothered it with Phyto to get rid of the dinos.
Oh, yeah. And then because that tank is linked to the rest of the system, and then the clams are happy, corals are happy.
The dinos are gone.
Dino is gone. For matter of fact, I learned from one of the coral farm. That's what they do. When they take down a system, they need to repair something, repair it, or reset it up, clean it. When they set it back up, always have a Dino outbreak, or even Dino outbreak, especially on the egg crate because of the new surface or the clean surface. So what they do is by bombard them with a live Phyto. I did it, and it worked. So that is one important thing. Because that live Phyto actually is competing with the Dino for nutrient. The dead stuff is just pollution.
The non-live Phyto, yeah.
Yeah, but a non-live Phyto is useful for those animals actually actively consuming them.
Gotcha.
And you have to target feed them into their mouths. Whatever fly away, landing in your tank, become a pollution.
And that becomes an issue. I just saw a comment from Ari. You guys dose at lights off or during the day? So Dong, Phyto, dose. I can answer this question because Dong told me the best time to dose is when your polyps are out in your SPS, right? So
definitely.
Lights out or early. I do mine early in the morning, and that's my polyps are dancing at that time of the day there. So that's when the lights are out. That's when you want to do it.
And for matter of fact, that brings up an interesting topic that I want to discuss is that we have this kind of old wife tale, the knowledge that passed down from ancient history, that we need to dose our reef roy everything when the light is out. I don't think so. You can dose all this food whenever the polyp is open. So probably that a lot of SPS, they only open at night for lots of people. That's why that the manufacturer will say maybe you dose it at night. But when you look at the polyps open in your reef tank, just dose it.
Yeah.
Like your homemade frozen food, dose it. When the polyp is out, it makes no difference. When the polyp is out, and they're going to grab it, they're going to eat it. And for matter of fact, I train my sun coral to open up during daytime.
That's cool. That's when they should be opening up so we can enjoy their beauty.
They whenever the food in a water column, now they know.
Right.
They open up daytime, they're expecting to be fed.
You've conditioned them. John Wright's asking, do corals benefit from fish poo rather than feeding? What about fish poo as a food source?
Well, here's the thing. Your fish is just not poop enough.
They need to poop. They need to poop for more coral nutrition.
Yes, they need to poop a lot. But let me give you one example. If you're holding a frozen cube, and then if you're feeding your tank that cube per day, your fish is not going to poop the same amount of organic material in that day. Unless that in a 100-gallon tank you have 300 fish. Yeah, maybe. So if just relying on the fish poop and pee, probably not enough. And I watch a live stream that there's an interesting question being brought up is that how many fish do you have in a tank to be able to fertilize your coral? Some people said like one fish per 10 gallon, or maybe one fish, something like that. But I think that you probably need more than that. The reason for that is that even just 1 cube of frozen food, the amount of nutrition packed inside your fish just probably poop for a week cannot generate that much, seriously. So if just rely on poop and pee, probably not enough.
Rich Colombo says I should feed them my wife's cooking. They'll poop all day. Awesome, classic.
But by the way, that homemade frozen food, that is the best thing you can get.
Quick, Dong, in terms of that homemade frozen food, what are your key ingredients there?
Okay, so the number 1 key ingredient is salmon fish. Let me tell you this. If you go to a pet shop, grab all the frozen food from the freezer, look at the ingredient, you probably won't find salmon there. The reason for that is that they're expensive.
Yeah.
They're very expensive. Well, in terms of making commercial frozen food. Because when I take class on the those what do you call it, the MBA business, those kind of class, I learned something. Just listen to some of the class.
Yeah.
Okay, they said that if you have a product on the market, if your manufacturer cost greater than 10% of this product of the retail price, this is not a successful product. So that $10 packs of frozen food, the costs have to be controlled below $1. That's including your packing, shipping, storage, cost, everything. That is why you don't find salmon in those frozen food, because they're expensive. Most fish are white fish that strip off the dock, cheap white fish. But salmon has several benefits. One of them is very rich in the fatty acid, like omega-3 fatty acid. Yeah. Or fish oil. So, and actually, fish oil is really important, very beneficial to coral. So, using salmon as your homemade frozen food, that is a key ingredient. That's your holy grail ingredient, and that's it. Salmon, raw salmon,
and actually, shrimp too, right?
Yeah, and shrimp, raw shrimp. I just add some variety. For example, just for the benefit of myself, if I think that I keep feeding one ingredient to my fish, it seems kind of boring.
Makes you happy, right?
Yeah, exactly. Make me happy. So I throw in some shrimp. And if Market Basket has scallop on sale, I throw in some scallop. But the major ingredient is raw salmon.
So John Wright's asking, are we talking about commercial bred salmon? Does it really matter?
I don't think so.
Okay.
But well, yes, and I don't know, because I use both. Then they I don't see any difference. But on the other hand, I always use raw salmon. Do you know why? Because our local Market Basket has something called salmon bits. They're salmon pieces.
Cheap.
All of them are raw, but there's a wild salmon. So that is the ingredient I use. But I really don't believe that there too much difference there.
Gotcha. All right, last question for you, Dong, and then we're going to wrap it up. Amino acids, do we need to dose that?
Okay. It depends on what you're feeding your tank. For example, that I found out that after feeding my homemade frozen food, amino acid does nothing. Amino acid, I dose it or not, absolutely no difference. For matter of fact, a lot of these frozen food have sufficient amount of amino acid in there. There's really no reason to add more. And if you look at the scientific evidence, the amount of amino acid, when we talk about the free-floating amino acid, the free-form amino acid, that coral can take in a minuscule, very, very small amount. Well, even that small amount, you do something, you benefit a little bit. But now, when you're feeding homemade frozen food, you have more than sufficient amino acid bombarding your tank. You don't need to spend your money on amino acid. But amino acid, there's another thing about commercial amino acid. Commercial amino acid, they have a heavy loading of glutamic acid or aspartic, mostly glutamic acid. So that way that when you feed the amino acid in your tank, your coral polyp open up, give you some enjoyment. Does it really do anything? No, it doesn't. But when you add those things, it gives you a response. Voila! You suddenly feel like your $30 is well spent because you can see your coral open up. But does it really does anything to the coral? Hell no, nothing. It is a hobby, enjoyment. So the bottom line is that if you're running a low nutrient method, which doesn't exist, there's no such thing as low nutrient tank. It's untestable nutrient tank. That's what we should say. And maybe you dose some amino acid may help. Actually, the benefit is more on you than on the coral. Because after you dose it, you feel better.
Psychological again, Dong.
Psychological thing.
One last question. We'll throw in one more last question from Big ES, and this is a good one that we've talked about in this live stream. Do frozen foods contribute to more bacterial infections? Can you get a bacterial infection by feeding frozen food?
Absolutely. There's no doubt about it. Now, let me tell you why. So the one major thing is a Vibrio, right? That's what AcroBiome found is lots of kind of Vibrio.
Vibrio, yep.
Yeah, and good and bad. And fish gut is heavily loaded with Vibrio. Basically, that's a predominant bacterial in fish, in all the ocean fish guts. Okay, so that, including the pathogenic, the bad type, and the good one, or beneficial one, but the beneficial one probably does nothing to your coral. It's not the same biological process, but the bad one definitely can infect your coral. So a lot of commercial frozen food actually including fish gut, the intestines, everything, the gill. Now we are talking about parasite. So the liver. So that by infecting your coral and your fish with commercial made frozen food is absolutely a reality. It's not a hypothesis, it's a reality which I see over and over again.
Can you prevent it by like microwaving that frozen food?
No, you cannot, because now you just cook it. Because that you lose all the nutrition value for your frozen food. There's a lot of nutrition value for frozen food actually coming from many of these bacterial whatever things on it, and also the protein. So the raw fish, basically cooked fish has much less nutrition value for your coral than raw fish, as well as to the fish in the tank.
Yeah.
The coral and fish both. So you microwave them, no, it doesn't do much at all. And also you have to microwave itself does not kill the bacteria. It's the heat, the microwave make the frozen food heat up. That's the heat kill the bacteria. But if you get enough microwave to kill the bacteria, your food is already well cooked.
Yeah.
Well done. So microwave does not work. And also saying, yes, absolutely, you can infect your fish and coral with disease, parasite, virus, bacterial by using frozen food. That is where the homemade frozen food come from. Important saying, no intestine, no gut, just salmon fresh.
Fillet,
the one
just the fillets.
Just the fillet, salmon fillet. That's what it is. Actually, preferably is the belly part, which the really fatty part. That's the part you want, and that's the part that Market Basket sells to people cheap.
That not the actual guts, but you're talking about the fillet around the belly.
The belly, the
skin around the belly.
Yeah, the belly meat.
Belly meat. Okay,
the meat,
gotcha.
Yeah, belly meat. So that's why homemade frozen food does not containing any of these intestines, because that's where all these harmful bacteria live. And also freezing preserve those bacterial, virus, and parasites.
Interesting.
Yep.
Well, that kind of that's a whole nother thing to to unpackage there and delve into. But Dong, listen,
And
go ahead.
one more thing is that do you know what's the major benefit? Is dirt cheap.
Yes.
For example, the salmon is what? The $7, $8, $11 a pound of meat, no dirty water. So commercial frozen food, you are talking about paying $50 to $70 per pound of dirty water.
Yes.
Yep.
Yes, there is a lot of
Yep.
water frozen into that food
Yeah.
for sure. Well, Dong, you have given everybody a lot to think about as usual, and I know your insights and knowledge are very much appreciated by myself and all the folks out there that have tuned in. So I want to thank you again, Dong, for joining us live, and I look forward to having you back on again in the future. So for those of you in the Northeast that are ever in the Boston area, you should definitely check Dong's place out. You do ship, I know, as well. And you can connect with Dong on the Boston Reefers Society website. He's a sponsor of the club, and he has a sponsors forum. So just go to bostonreefers.org. Right, Dong?
Yep. Thank you, Keith.
Yep.
Thank you.
Yep.
Yeah.
All right, Don. Well, listen, that's going to do it for this show, and I want to thank you again for being on the live stream. I also want to thank both Bulk Reef Supply and Ecotech Marine for sponsoring the live stream, and also want to thank all you folks out there for tuning in and participating via the chat. Really appreciate it. Also want to thank Paul, the moderator, who's also the president of the Boston Reefers Society. Please join and support your local reefing clubs. They are so important to this hobby. Finally, I want to let you all know that all episodes of Rappin With ReefBum are available as podcasts on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, Stitcher, and Amazon. My next Rappin With ReefBum live stream will be back. We're back on to Thursdays, folks. No more Tuesday for a while, at least. But Thursday, June 15th, 7 p.m. next week. Chris Meckley will be back on from ACI, so that will, I'm sure, be another very, very fun and fact-filled and just very interesting live stream with Chris. It always is. So if you want to check out the full upcoming schedule of guests, visit reefbum.com under the YouTube section. So until next time, be safe and be well, and we will see you next time.